Well, thank you for staying with us on the AM show. Time now for us to bring you the news review. We're joined by Executive Director for the Media Foundation for West Africa, Suleiman Abrahima. He is our guest as we get into the stack of papers we have. Some of them prominent newspapers we don't have this morning, but we have a whole stack that we're going to be bringing you. And I'll also be running some of the news items we have on the chopping board today, together with some of the items we're going to be discussing on the show with Suleiman Abrahima. Mr. Abrahima, a very good morning to you, sir.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. This segment always brought to you by Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, and they are offering free prostate screening for men, free fertility screening if you're a woman. And it's advisable that you check on these before something you wouldn't want to happen to you actually does. Nowadays, a lot of young people are succumbing to infertility, especially in women. It's not that men can't be that as well, and prostate disease in men. Here's where you can locate Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. Here in Accra, they're located at Spintex opposite the Shell signboard. In Kumasi, Krodoma here behind the Angel Educational Complex. There's Takrade and Naji Estates, that's where you can find them. Tema Community 22. Then there's Techiman Hanswa and Esiama and Zima. If you'd like to call them, what I suggest you do, the numbers to call 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. But let's get now into the news review. Mr. Abrahima, I'd like to start with you by citing a few issues that have cropped up. One of them having to do with Agenda 111. We've spoken about how it can help us in terms of our capacity in dealing with pandemics like COVID-19. But we've heard from the likes of Professor Fred Binka, who says this will not serve the purpose in terms of being a policy measure to combat the pandemic. According to him, I'm just trying to paraphrase what he says, the construction of 101 district health facilities is not feasible, first of all, indicating the projects would only increase the number of uncompleted government structures due to a lack of funding. What do you make of what Prof says? Hospital facilities, good thing, but he's making the point they will be uncompleted and that will lead to a spin-off of more inherited projects that are abandoned. Any quick take on that?
Well, I share the same sentiment. I think that we are becoming a nation where politicians just want to make sweeping statements for the applause. Otherwise, under our circumstances and knowing our economic situation, it is really unrealistic for anyone to say that I'm going to build 101 hospitals. And at that time, they were giving indications that these hospitals were even going to be completed within a certain short period of time. It was absolutely impossible, but it was something that the politicians thought that they could say for the usual applause, and so they said it. Now, beyond the fact that it is unrealistic in terms of completion, even if these facilities were to be completed by some strange circumstances, the questions to ask would be, do we really have the logistics and the manpower to really make these facilities serve the purpose for which they are being constructed? Look, I mean, we are looking into some reports, and so far, there's evidence to indicate that, look, the whole of the northern sector, Upper East, Upper West, Northeast, Savannah, Northern region proper, none of the hospitals in these 5 regions has an MRI machine, for example.
Wow.
None. Not even Tamale Teaching Hospital has an MRI machine. You know, so if you have a situation like this, and these are regions that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about districts. So I'm not talking about polyclinics, and I'm not talking about ship compound or clinics and so on. I'm talking about even the regional hospitals, including the Tamale Regional, teaching hospitals. None of them has, an MRI machine. So if somebody needs an MRI scan, for example, in any part of this, in any of these parts of our country, the person may have to either come down to either Kumasi or to Accra. So if you have a government that is not, thinking about, and mind you, In terms of even ventilators, when we went through the COVID process and people needed ventilators and so on, and it's not only during COVID that people need ventilators. You know, even as we speak now, there are people who may get into a certain condition that will require that they go, they
True.
receive the
COVID exposed our need for those, and unfortunately, we've not been able to stock up as many as possible. Maybe we're waiting for the next pandemic.
Well, I mean, so you ask yourself, really, if all the monies we receive from IMF then, from the World Bank, from the European Union, from, friendly nations and all of that were supposed to come in to help us combat COVID, what was so unnecessary or unessential about ventilators that as we speak now, we still have, just inadequate number of ventilators in the system. So it's not about whether these 111 hospitals will be completed or not completed. We really don't even have the manpower. I was talking to someone the other day, and I was told that the whole country, in terms of neurosurgeons, we have just about less than 20. The whole country. When you take the other specializations, it's about the same. Why are we not focusing on getting, adequate number of specialists trained to be in the system? There are nurses in the system who have been at home for almost 3-4 years now and are crying. We want to get posted. We have finished. I have finished whatever it is that I need to get posted, but I'm still at home. And I personally know a number of people who, are raising these complaints. So if you have the money to build a hospital, and there are hospitals that are operating under capacity in terms of manpower, why don't you put these people at work so that they can serve, the facilities that are already in operation? So again, for me, it was just a statement for the applause, and if anything, they would want to do anything close to completion, they would just cut the sword, start something, and then leave it.
It becomes even more problematic looking at the spate of the attrition rate when it comes to our nurses, for example. The numbers that have left in 2022, the numbers that have left, in fact, I believe it was the first quarter of 2022, where about 3,000 nurses left. They've been leaving in droves. There are some measures, even from the UK government, to stem the tide of same. Some have said, well, how about for every nurse we take from any of these countries, we give a token to government? But it is becoming a huge problem. Recently, there has been talk about that again. I remember hearing the Director General of the Ghana Health Service at a point saying that where it's going, we may get to the point where we cannot even deliver quality health care on the back of a lack of nurses. So we do not have the hospital facilities. We do not, and for those that we have, we're not refurbishing them. We're not, it was how many months ago that we heard of that hospital facility, I think in some municipality. It hadn't seen a facelift since the 90s. And in the children's ward, the pediatric ward, a snake was found. Imagine that. So I really do not know how we're tackling health in this country. I don't know.
No, I think when it comes to health, and as in many other sectors, it is just, we look up to God. We just have these facilities and hope that things will go as they should. Otherwise, I don't think that the government of the day has provided any appropriate response to show some level of seriousness in terms of healthcare delivery. Like you are saying, our nurses are leaving. Is it that we have too much? Is it that we have redundant nurses? We've trained more than we need. Fine, if it were so, why not? I mean,
Cuba exports doctors. If that were the case, it would be fine. But it isn't.
Yes. So if we are training more than we need, and that is why I believe that whole idea about taking away those allowances in order to enable us as a country to have more nurses and teachers trained was a very, very valid policy. But again, for political populism, they say, oh, we're going to go back to the nurses training allowance, teachers training allowance, and they still continue to use it as if it is something that is an achievement. Teachers training allowance restored, nurses training allowance restored. What they don't tell us is the fact that with that restoration, they have to cut back on the number of teachers and nurses that are being trained. And even those few ones who are trained have issues about getting employed. So we are in a very, very difficult situation. And for me, the worry is that, you don't even see any indication of seriousness, any indication of honesty and commitment towards improving our situation going forward. And for me, that is the tragedy that we have as a nation.
Let's get into the newspapers. And when we're wrapping up, do remind me, should I forget, to bring in the bit about the independent power producers. It's one of those major matters we're talking about this morning, and where we find ourselves in terms of their threat to cut off supply to us. But let's get into the Daily Guide newspaper now. 2023 Hajj airlift begins. 5 shot dead in police crossfire. I'm focused, Baumia, to critics, and Ajay Mensah Kosa chairs second UN Habitat Assembly. There's also crackdown on illegal tree felling, Frema tells FC. That's the Forestry Commission. On the back page, arm wrestling world president Scribe set to visit Ghana, and Midiama win first league title. Faisal Royals, Tamale City relegated. There's also City conquer Champions League mountain at last to clinch treble. And while it was a bittersweet moment for me because I was supporting Manchester City, but as a Manchester United fan, it irked me a bit that they had equaled what we had done many, many years ago. Congratulations to the citizens. We are City United. But anyway, into the major stories here. 5 people have been killed in a crossfire between police and suspected criminals in Botiano and nearby communities in the Gan South municipality of the Greater Accra region. A statement signed by Police Director of Public Affairs, ACP Grace Ansa Akrofi, said the police was conducting anti-robbery and anti-land guard operations in the area when the shootout happened on June the 8th, 2023. The statement noted that the 5 were among those terrorizing people and landowners in Botiano and surrounding communities. Now, quote, upon spotting the approaching police team, the suspects opened fire from their hideout, prompting the police to return fire, the statement said. As a result, 5 of the suspects were injured and later pronounced dead at the hospital. The remaining suspects fled the scene and are still on the run, the police indicated. 1 AK-47 assault rifle, 10 rounds of AK-47 ammunition, 1 pump-action gun with 9 rounds of BB cartridges, 2 pistols, and 10 rounds of 9mm ammunition, 1 unregistered Toyota Tacoma pickup, 4 motorbikes, 3 of which are unregistered, a knife and pepper spray were recovered from the crime scene, according to the statement. It appears these armed robbers are becoming more and more brazen in their approach, or at least people who engage in wanton disorder. And at least in this instance, per the report from the police, they have been dealt with. I just pray that those who are on the run will be apprehended as well. Now, boy 13 commits suicide, and a 13-year-old boy has allegedly committed suicide by hanging at Heman News site in the Ashanti region, the police has reported. The body of Kelvin Aqua was found hanging on a nylon sponge in an uncompleted building at Echima Heman News site around 4:45 p.m. on June the 4th, 2023. An elder brother of the deceased, identified as Julius Bona, a resident of Heman News site, reported the sad case to the police. Especially sad on a day when we mark the World Day Against Child Labor, at least something focusing on children. And unfortunately, we have the story. Any quick reactions to these 2 stories?
When a life is lost under some circumstances, particularly in relation to this young boy, one is not sure about what would have triggered this, but sometimes just out of a small incident and such a person feeling, hey, if my dad comes home to hear about this, what would he do to me? And maybe it could result in taking such an action, which is really, really sad. It I believe, re-echoes the need for parents to really go through the necessary mechanisms for bringing up their children in ways that, wouldn't get them into some psychological and traumatic situations that may result in actions like this. I think it is quite a sad one. On the incident involving by the police, Well, one thing that I believe that we would have all noticed in the last couple of months would be a reduction in the number of reports we are receiving about armed robbery attacks. And I believe that something may be working. It's not just out of yes, it could be the favor of God, but it also means that people who are supposed to be working to curtail these actions are doing their work.
Right.
And I believe that this incident in Botswana is part of perhaps why we are seeing a reduction in the level of crime, in the level of armed robbery in our country. What is important for me is that matters like these also have to be investigated, because sometimes there are allegations against the police about some of these actions, and the fact that maybe there are stories behind the stories we are told. And so it's important that investigations are conducted, and I believe that the police themselves would even conduct their own investigations. I know what used to be now they call it the PPID or so, the professional, the unit that is supposed to ensure that there is compliance with professional standards and all of that, is really up to speed. And people commend the IGP for all the innovation, for all the reforms that are taking place. And I believe that, yes, they would also conduct their own investigations and ensure that indeed the men on the ground who took this action really did what was professional.
Let's just take a quick look at the international stories and wrap with the other papers very quickly. In the Daily Guide, 3 British passengers missing after boat bursts into flames in Egypt. That was a curious incident. But 2 major stories I want us to just take a quick look at. Colombia indigenous children survived 40 days eating seeds and roots. They were in a small plane, their parents as well, and it crashed in the Colombian end of the Amazon. Now, their parents died, but the children survived. And even a 1-year-old as well, they all survived. They were eating seeds and roots. This is nothing short of a miracle. They were found in recent days. And then Romania recalls Kenya ambassador over racist monkey slur. I just have to get into this. So Romania has recalled its ambassador to Kenya and apologized after he compared Africans to monkeys. Dragos Tigao made the comments during a meeting at a UN building in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, on April the 26th. We still have human beings like this around the world. I'll reserve my comments and not get into the distasteful with him. Any quick reactions, very quick reactions as we get into the Ghanaian partnership?
I also I watched the miracle of the survivors of these young folks involved in the accident on television, and it was, as you say, nothing short but a miracle. It also tells about the resilience of the human being, and how people would do whatever it takes to be able to survive when circumstances require that they do that.
Right.
And, so, yeah, I mean, it's a miracle, but it also tells how we as human beings can really do what it is to survive in circumstances that may be very, very challenging for us. And so it's a very a story of elation, and I think that we need to learn quite a bit from it. The diplomatic row that happened resulting in the recall, as you said, well, there are people like that who still feel that Africans are really less human than white. It's unfortunate that we still have people who would think that way, but it also should challenge us as the black race to do things that would, make people who may be thinking this way really at some point feel that they were being foolish. Unfortunately, even as I would never subscribe to anything like that, for me, it's really sad that sometimes when you see how we manage our own affairs, you wonder, why would people continue to do this? Why
Right.
would people put themselves in this kind of situation? Why would people continue to live in this kind of filth? Why would people continue to act this way? So we also do have a responsibility to educate ourselves, to sensitize ourselves, to do the right thing, to lead ourselves better, to avoid this, greed and stealing of public wealth in order to buy houses in Ghana, in Dubai, in the UK, and so on. Because, of course, when I look at people who are involved in acts like that, I will ask myself, are these people humans or they are animals?
Right.
So we have a responsibility to also acquit ourselves well.
Right. Let's quickly get into a few more issues and then we shall wrap the conversation. I'm going to take topical matters from a number of papers so you can respond to them. The Ghanaian publisher, I'm focused on my job, not the NDC. That's according to Vice President Bawumia, but I'm not going to be focusing on that. I'm just reading it out. I'm sure we know the story to it. But the banner headline, Respond to Climate Change, Nana's Green Ghana Appeal. The story is on page 3, and it says, President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo has rallied Ghanaians to be supportive of policies and programs aimed at building the country's resilience and adaptation to climate change. Quoting him, he says, "Our hope depends on the actions we take today," he noted, citing references from the World Meteorological Organization, whose recent global report says, quote, "The past 8 years are on track to be the 8th warmest on record." Tied to that, the president has also said, like you would find in the Find It newspaper, make tree planting nurturing a habit. That's according to the president. But at the same time, I always talk about what, for lack of a better word, I would call hypocrisy. We're saying Green Ghana and all of that, expending so much money, many millions, and yet look at the devastation of Galamsey. How do we, make these fuse together? The sort of wanton dissipation of our environment. So that's it for that story. Then there is also Dr. Bawumia saying, I don't know how you feel about this, our track record is our campaign message. And someone asked, which track record? But maybe you can tell me more about that track record. I would end with the Business and Financial Times. It says, Ecobank confident of growth despite macroeconomic challenges, posts 40% revenue growth with 26 billion Ghana cedis in assets and focus on rebuilding capital, strengthening relationships. There's also gold output up by 32% as country returns to top spot. We're the top in Africa once more, taking over from South Africa. And finally, pressure mounts as demand for T-bills falls short of issuance target. I remember someone recently reached out to me and asked, should I go and get T-bills? I had to give them a frank answer, looking at the different dynamics in the system. But that's how we'll wrap the conversation from the newspapers end. I'll just squeeze in the last bit to you like I promised. But any quick reflection on these stories before we wrap?
Well, the Green Ghana initiative, I think, is a very fantastic initiative, and we need to commend the initiators of that project or policy, and of course the government, for that matter. It's really something that I think as a nation we have to adapt as a policy, as a standing policy, regardless of which ever party or government is in power, because it is perhaps one of the surest ways of inculcating in Ghanaians the spirit and habit of greeniness around us, and making sure that at all times, whatever little space that we have that can take a tree, whether it's a fruit that you want to plant, an orange tree, a banana, a mango tree, or whatever it is, we are able to do that. So it's, for me, a very great initiative, and the government must be commended for how serious it takes it when the day is up on us.
Right.
So, but of course, the most important thing is also to ensure that the forests that we already have are not also being destroyed. We already know that, or at least we are told, that there is still ongoing mining in some of our forest reserves. The other day we were talking about Atiwa Forest, and how there's been a tussle between government and
Arusha Ghana, the eco-conscious group, among others,
to preserve that forest reserve. And so yes, it's a great policy, but the government must also ensure that the existing forests that we have are not also destroyed.
Right.
Dr. Bawumia on the track record of the government being their campaign message. Well, I mean, I think it has to be so. What else would be their campaign message apart from the track record of the government in the last 8 years? And whether that track record is positive or negative, I think Ghanaians will tell.
Right.
Ghanaians will be looking at the issues of corruption. They'll be looking at the issues of whether the government has been candid and honest with them. They'll be looking at the issues of the economy. They'll be looking at the issues of our currency. They'll be looking at the issues of cost of living. And then that would be the basis for determining whether the track record is positive or negative. I don't want to go into my personal views about the track record. But Ghanaians would be the better judges on December.
Suleimana, before you take leave of us, so just two matters, if you can address them in, we have less than a minute, but I'm still going to throw them to you. The independent power producers, they are threatening. They need their money. There is some sort of plan. They need about $450 million to stay afloat. There's a plan by government to restructure about $1.3 billion in the debt owed them. And there's also the special prosecutor. He's been talking on the Professor Frimpong Boateng saga, and he says he doesn't come to canonize saints or anything. He's just doing his job. How do you feel about Professor Frimpong Boateng? Is he being witch-hunted, so to speak? Quick thoughts. Very quick thoughts.
Well, for me, the Frimpong Boateng issue, the OSP says it's a luckless coincidence, but it's a difficult one to believe. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt. It's a very, very difficult job. I mean, you must have the heart of a lion to be able to take up that special prosecutor's job.
Right.
And therefore, he needs the support of all of us. I mean, coincidentally, or he's also a young man. You know, in our system, culturally, dealing with people who are older than you can always be a difficult one. But the Frimpong Boateng development, yes, the coincidence is quite curious. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt. At the end of the day, all we want is the betterment of our country, and not whether an individual is a saint or whatever. At the end of the day, I'm sure investigations will reveal whatever it is.
Quickly on the IPPs.
Well, it's a scary one. The other day, I was in a meeting with colleague civil society heads, and I listened to presentations from my colleagues who are in the energy sector, like ISEP and the others. And the picture that was being painted was quite scary. I really don't know how Ghana is going to be able to overcome the challenge that we face right now, and the amount of money we need to be able to keep our power sector stable. I can only hope that some miracle will be done. Otherwise, the future ahead of us can be scary, and if we are not careful, we basically will be going back to doomsday. Just as we were in IMF, this government says we've exited the IMF. We were in doomsday before. My candid opinion is that the Mahama administration did all the necessary investments to end doomsday before this government took over.
Right.
And yet the government would want us to believe that they came and ended doomsday. But the way things are going, if we are not careful, we would end up going back to doomsday. And let's all pray and advocate against any such possibility.
Thank you, Mr. Brima, and we wish you the best of the day. Mr. Suleimana Brima, Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa, bringing us the end of the news review. This one came through. It says, happy birthday to my amazing wife, Lydia Bentel of ARB Apex Bank. It's such a blessing to be celebrating another year of your incredible existence. You carry so much joy and love with you wherever you go. And I want you to know how much Aseda, Nyameye, and Adepa appreciate you. From your husband, Michael, Akoto, and kids. We end with Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. They allow us to bring this segment to you every day. They're offering free prostate screening, free fertility screening as well. Where can you locate them? Here in Accra at Spintex opposite the Shell signboard. Kumasi, Kronomabwe here behind the Angel Educational Complex. There's Takrady Anaji Estate, Tema Community 22, Techiman Hanswa and Siama Nzima. If you'd like to reach them, just call these numbers, 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. But of course, Just the start of sports over the weekend, that big one, the Champions League final, Manchester City winning the gong. I'm sure you want to hear a lot more about that. There's more coming up in sports.